Hello. Today I would like to talk to you about alcohol use disorder, often known as alcoholism or alcohol dependence. Now, if I'm using the definition found in the DSM-4, which, if you don't know, stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorder, alcohol use disorder is defined as a maladaptive pattern of drinking that leads to significant impairment or distress. One thing I think you should keep in mind is just how prevalent this disorder is. Now, I'm speaking strictly for the United States, but 6% of all people over age 18 struggle with this. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. If that is not tangible enough for you, if you need like a more concrete number, that's 15 million people. Now, it is a little more prevalent in men than women. 10 million men and only half that, 5 million women, are affected by it. But we know what the stuffy medical definition is, but getting down to brass tacks here, what is alcoholism? Honestly, if I was going to break it down to its simplest form, it is addiction to the consumption of alcohol, whether or not it causes problems for you, which it can and it will. Obviously, anything that impairs your judgment can be harmful. It can lead to aggression and violence, all around, just an almost complete lack of restraint if used repeatedly, memory blackouts. But how is this different than, say, other drugs that lead to an altered state of consciousness? How is dependence on this any more dangerous than, say, on marijuana? Well, because alcohol can damage your body. It can damage your body a lot. For instance, getting to the heart of the matter, that's a terrible joke, I'm sorry. But it can lead to a heart murmur. It can lead to high blood pressure, even a stroke. Obviously, it affects your liver. If you know anything about alcohol, you know it's bad for your liver. It can lead to cirrhosis, cancer of the liver, cancer of the throat as well, which I thought was kind of interesting. Really, though, any form of cancer is pretty bad for you. And if you're just constantly getting blackout drunk, this is the kind of thing your body's going through. And that chronic need to consume something that's bad for you is obviously tremendously harmful, even in the short term, but especially over the long term, as an alcoholic would consume. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the history. Now, as someone who is generally just kind of fascinated by this kind of stuff, the history of healthcare for the mentally ill in general is an especially interesting read, just because so much of it is just barbaric, looking at it through a modern lens. But with alcoholism, one thing that I find interesting is that for a long time, it really wasn't treated. It was viewed as just kind of a mental failing or even a spiritual one. Now, there are exceptions. Many Native American tribes would organize what they call sobriety circles, which is pretty much the genesis point of the modern day AA meeting. They would get around and support the drunker members of the tribe, which I thought was kind of interesting. Really, though, Benjamin Rush, if that name sounds familiar with you, it should. He signed the Declaration of Independence. He's a professor, he's dead now, a professor from Philadelphia. He really got the ball rolling. One, for legislation of alcohol. He was a big opponent of drinking any sort of alcoholic substance. He was actually a big supporter of opium. He said that was a safe alternative to drinking any sort of ale. But also for treatment. He designed something called the tranquilizing chair in order to treat those with alcohol dependence. Basically, it was a kind of sensory deprivation. You sat in a chair and put a box on your head. You couldn't hear anything, you couldn't see, and somehow that was supposed to help. It didn't. There really wasn't any results, but that was kind of the origin of at least trying to help these people, because it wasn't really treated before. They were just looked at as weak if they struggle with this. Alcohol and alcoholics have been blamed for a lot of things throughout history. The stigma around the mentally ill in general is often very negative. But alcohol especially, it was blamed, banned nationwide at one point. If you recall the 18th Amendment, in 1990 they just banned alcohol. 1919, sorry, just banned alcohol. It was later undone, but it really shows just how hated this group of people were, that they were blamed for the entire nation's problems. And to go off on just a bit of a tangent, I always like to see how the mentally ill are portrayed in movies or TV, because it's usually kind of interesting, whether it's accurate or inaccurate. But with alcoholics, what I found interesting wasn't how they were portrayed, it was how much they were portrayed. Because there's an alcoholic character, I can't give you any real straight numbers, but there are just so many that there were actually lists when I was doing research of best alcoholics in movie or TV. When there's that much in quantity, that there's certain ones that are considered better than others. I thought that was interesting. But as far as treating someone of alcoholism, this is the hard part. This is the part that really you got to kind of dive into. But I think obviously treatment for anybody with an illness, you got to look at the individual first. But in terms of effectiveness, again, everything works for some people and doesn't for others. But group therapy seems to be the one that sort of strength in numbers mentality, sharing that pain, really, I think is honestly the heart of therapy in general, is someone sharing their thoughts and feelings with somebody else. But group therapy, I think, would be the one that I'd recommend for alcoholics. I wouldn't, any dependence just going cold turkey is dangerous. I have known people to see results from that. There was a fellow I was acquainted with. He wasn't a friend, but he was in the bottle for 20 years, and he's about a year and a half sober now, and he just quit. It was hard, obviously you think about going back a lot, but I think it really did help him in the long term. So as for, just what to do with alcoholics, I think they, as with any person who's mentally ill, they deserve our empathy and our help. So thanks for watching.